Right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Can I welcome you here this evening? All of us here, councillors, and can I also welcome members of the public, and in particular, somebody who was a former councillor who was a very distinguished chairman in this committee for many, many years. Thank you. Right, I start off with a live streaming announcement, which I'm now beginning to learn by heart. I tend to go through some housekeeping matters. This meeting is being streamed via YouTube and recorded. The recording will be uploaded to YouTube within 2 working days when it can be assessed by everyone. Members, please use the microphone in front of you when talking and ensure that your microphone is off once you finish speaking. Another member or officer will try to assist where reasonably possible. On hearing the fire alarm, we ask all attendees to immediately evacuate the building. Please evacuate via the nearest fire exits and make your way to the community square outside the main reception doors. Thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence.
We've received an apology from Councillor Samir Jassal. Councillor Alan Metcalfe is attending as a substitute.
Thank you. To sign the minutes of a previous meeting, is that generally agreed? Yep. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Declare any interest any members may have in the items. I don't think I need to read through that. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Consider whether any items in Part A of the agenda should be considered in private or items in Part B. I have none. Therefore, we move on to the Planning Committee meeting of today, Wednesday, the 24th of September. And if we go to item 6, there are 2 items on that, A and B. Item B has been withdrawn by the applicant. Therefore, we will only be considering item A, which is one you can see in front of you, land south of Pear Tree Lane, Sean. Thank you. Who would like to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. Amanda will be introducing the supplementary report, but in advance of Amanda doing that, I just wanted to clarify that the reason for referral is because the original application that was before committee previously was as a result of a councillor call-in, and the reason why this report is back with committee on this today is because the decision-making body is planning committee and officers don't have any delegated authority to issue a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The following relates to the supplementary report to the application granted permission on the 11th of June 2025 Planning Committee for the change of use of the land for the stationing of 2 static homes, 2 touring caravans and shared day room for the Gypsy Traveller occupation, associated hard and soft landscaping at land south of Pear Tree Lane, Sean. This slide shows the site as outlined in red, located on the southern side of Pear Tree Lane. The proposed development was reported to the 11th of June Planning Committee and was approved subject to conditions as laid out in the committee report and the supplementary report. Members may recall that queries were raised during the Planning Committee relating to ecology. The applicant has also received comments advising that the application would be judicially reviewed due to the lack of ecological information. As a result, the applicant has submitted a preliminary ecological study, which needs to be considered by a planning committee. The preliminary ecological appraisal does not raise any new ecological matters. The mitigation required is suitably addressed in the planning conditions as agreed at Planning Committee on the 11th of June. As such, the summary reasons for recommendations as set out in the previous committee report still stand. No other material considerations have arisen since the 11th of June which need to be taken into consideration. To conclude, as per the Planning Committee's decision of the 11th of June, it is recommended that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. No changes are proposed to the planning conditions already agreed at Planning Committee, which were set out within the committee report and repeated in the supplementary report, which are summarised in this slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Now, if I can just go through once again how I want to proceed or will proceed with this. I will ask members of committee for any points of information or clarification they may desire. I will ask, well, I would ask any board members, but there seem to be none here. And once that has happened, I will then invite the speakers. There is one speaker for the application and 2 against the application. They will each have 3 minutes and will be guided by their lights and will answer questions, again, of clarification and information from members of the committee. So I'm looking to members of the committee. Any comments, Gary?
No, thank you, Chair. Just a little bit of clarification on the time scale. I've been looking at the whole thing, and they were talking about how long the applicant are allowed to have the caravans and so on. But how long are they allowed to be there? Is it the next 10 years, 5 years, 20 years? And the reason why I say that, because later on, it said here that if the applicant wishes to leave, then they should clear everything up for the 6th month before they agree to leave. So obviously there is some kind of time scale that sometime in the future that the applicant will decide to leave. So I would like to know if there's been any information with regards to any timescale that's been agreed between the planning committee and the applicant. Which leads me to our second question after I hear from you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I believe you're referencing condition number 9 regarding the discontinuation of use. That only comes into play if the use is discontinued. There is no timescale set for that use to discontinue. So as far as the LPA is concerned and the application, it will be there for perpetuity. It's only if the use ceases, this condition is engaged. So there is no timescale. I hope that clarifies matters.
Gary.
Thank you very much. So we clarify that because we all know that when it talk about static homes, we know it's basically a glorified caravan. My parents used to have one, which was 12 feet wide and 36 feet long. They had one in Dover, so we know what they are. These are not permanent structure. This is why I asked about the timescale, because the structure they're going to be put on there are not themselves permanent. So that's one thing. Also, it's talked about 2 touring vans that can be included. Now, the thing I have about a touring van is that it could be any size. I mean, you can have a small one driven by a car, a slightly medium size driven by a Land Rover, or a large one driven by a lorry. Now, each size had quite implications to the arrival and leaving of the site because the size of the touring caravan. So would there be an agreement to ensure that we have a reasonable timescale that if they're going to be a considerable size touring van arriving and leaving? Thank you, Chair.
Zad?
Thank you, Chair. So I believe you're now referencing condition 7, which is intended to limit the number of caravans and the static mobile home on the site. The condition doesn't reference the specific size of those mobile homes and caravans. However, they would need to meet the requirements set out in the drawings.
Thank you. Can I just remind people we're looking at the ecological survey and those aspects which are relevant and important to this, rather than revisiting the previous application for which permission has been granted. But many thanks. Frank, first of all, then Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at this. This is about the ecological report. Wasn't it, if my memory serves me right, did not the head of planning on the 11th say it wasn't necessary? Why is it now necessary? Is it because there's a legal challenge? And if so, let's discuss the legal challenge. Secondly, I'd like to know who called this in. It's got councillor calling. I know for a fact it wasn't any of the ward councillors.
Thank you, Chair. So to address the latter point, as I said in my opening, the only reason it states it's a councillor calling was because the original application was a councillor calling, and because a decision notice hadn't been issued for the application, we've brought it back to planning committee for planning committee to consider the ecological point. With regards to the ecological point, there is no judicial review stroke legal challenge. What I advised on the 11th was that ecological issues, there weren't any that came into play. What happened post-planning committee, as set out in the report, is that the agent, etc., were challenged on ecological matters, and they've then submitted a preliminary ecological assessment. And the only way for that to be taken into consideration by the local planning authority is for it to come back to committee. Now, what effectively the preliminary ecological assessment says is that there are no ecological issues that come into play that haven't already been taken into account. Therefore, the conditions as they stand are sufficient for this application, and that's what's effectively set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of information, just to correct us out there. It was mentioned earlier that the judicial review was a reason that this ecological report had been brought forward. That was mentioned earlier, and that has been recorded on YouTube. That was mentioned earlier. I would like to just say that the ward members, I was aware as well, did not call this in because from their point of view, and not to paraphrase, but it feels like this is a reaction to that judicial review rather than, and it's a huge shame that this committee did not listen to speakers and members' concerns about there not being an ecological report in that meeting on June the 11th. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just to make it abundantly clear to members, there is no judicial review. Thank you, Chair.
And can I confirm what Councillor Elliott has said, that all three ward councillors have spoken to me and made it clear they did not want to call this in, or if this was not called in as a result of their official duties. But I can see the reason why it would be called in, because it certainly was an issue in the original discussion. But I stand corrected if anyone wants to. Right. Looking round, I've seen no other members of committee who want to say anything. So I will now move to the one speaker, it's Simon McKay, for the application. And again, Simon, you do sit down. You know the rules. You have 3 minutes, guided by the lights. When you come to orange, you have 1 minute left, and you must stop after the red light. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members. Yes, I think it's worth making clear from our perspective. Obviously, I was here and I spoke at the previous committee meeting and heard all the discussions. And following that meeting, I was advised on behalf of some of the residents that they were going to consider making an application for a judicial review. So I took it upon myself and spoke to the client and said, look, what we need to do is try and protect the decision that had been made already at the committee meeting. And so I advised the client to instruct the ecological appraisal and the outdated report that was then carried out for the Badger survey to protect the client and also, from my perspective, protect the council's decision. I think the report's quite clear. From my perspective, it tells me everything that I and some of us knew already, that the site had very limited ecological value. There is clearly opportunity for enhancement, and I think that's captured by the condition, which is a fairly standard condition for bird boxes, bat boxes, to improve some of the planting on site as well. And I think from our perspective, having this document as part of a decision seemed a safer approach when the decision was ultimately issued. Obviously, it's taken a few months to get here because the council's busy and committee only meets generally once a month. So I think it's just important to highlight the reasons why it was. No judicial review has actually been made, but my advice to the client professionally was, before a decision was issued, and I then approached the planning officer and said, would you have any objection to us submitting this report? It was actually something that was prompted by us on behalf of the client. I think all the other issues have been considered as part of the application, so I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Mr. McKay, please sit down for a minute. No, you don't get away that easily, unfortunately. Right, thank you for clarification. Are there any questions or points of view from members of the committee? I see none, so you do actually get away very easily. Thank you very much. We are now coming to the speakers against the application. So number 1 is Susan Linley. If you'd like to take the seat. Again, I'll just quickly repeat, be guided by the lights. You have 15 minutes and then maybe ask questions or for points of clarification from members. 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for allowing Sean Parish Council to speak to this item. Attendance tonight is largely about the proposed conditions to be attached to this planning application. I know you've set up there that the conditions were in the report. In fact, they weren't. You had to follow a link to find them. They weren't in the minutes and they weren't in the decision report. So this is actually the first time we've had an opportunity to review them. We hope that you've also seen our supplementary representations, which contain the same information. Condition 7, caravan numbers. Condition 7 presently states that no more than 2 static mobile homes and 2 touring caravans shall be stationed on the site at any one time. I've emphasised the words and stationed. The application was for 2 static caravans, which is 2 pitches. There was mention in the application that 2 touring caravans owned by the occupants of the static caravans would be stored, meaning that these parked up items would not be occupied or in use at the same time as the static caravans. Condition 7 is presently ambiguous, as it implies that the touring caravans are in addition to the static caravans and that all may be in habitation use on the site at the same time, whereas that should not be the case. We object to condition 7 as presently worded, as it reads as if there would be 4 pitches rather than only 2. It needs amending so as to have clear wording and to reflect the correct situation of only 2 pitches. Condition 8, removal of permitted development rights. We consider that this condition should also include a clause that no other buildings and structures are permitted without planning permission. There are 2 other conditions that we suggest should be added. And firstly, the application was based on meeting the needs of a family unit of 5 closely related members of the travelling community from outside the area, but in order to facilitate future schooling of 2 children locally and to support the health needs of 1 adult. In view of the residential area location, we consider that the permission should be made personal to the applicant and named family members, and/or be restricted to being for a single closely related family unit, perhaps with a maximum limit on the number of occupants. Secondly, the site is a small and isolated traveller site, which is inherently unsuitable as compared to national guidance. We consider that a time limit on use could usefully be included. It is also the case that use will no longer be needed once sufficient facilities that better meet the needs of the traveller community are made available in Gravesham through the forthcoming local plan update. As an additional comment, we raise a procedural query as we understand that there should have been a consultation about the ecological appraisal report. the part apparently from KCC. Well, not quite clear if that was before or after.
Thank you, Mrs. Linley.
Well, no consultation has taken place.
Thank you. The light is now red. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. First of all, any comment officers may want to make?
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on a number of points, the number of pitches is restricted via the layout, which is dealt with via Condition 1 approved plans. It wouldn't be appropriate to restrict the permission via personal condition, given it's a grey belt site and there's an unmet need for travellers. So it's the unmet need for travellers, and that's being addressed rather than very special circumstances which specifically relate to the personal circumstances of an individual family in their own right. With regards to the comment around national guidance, I believe that's referencing national space standards. They don't apply to mobile homes and traveller sites. They apply to C3 use, which is residential dwellings, and you can't apply those space standards to effectively a non-C3 use, and a gypsy and traveller site is not a C3 use in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at members of the committee. Does anybody want to ask for a point of clarification or information or question? Thank you, Mr. Linney. You've escaped from the table. Right, our second applicant against the application is Robin Fearbold, representing the Dickens Country Protection Society. Robin, you know what to do.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members. I'm appearing as the chairman of the Dickens Country Protection Society. I'm also the vice chairman of the Chiltern Parish Council. It wasn't altogether clear. We received notice of this meeting, but the purpose of it wasn't altogether clear from the correspondence that we received. So I've not had chance really to do as much research as I would like to have done. I note that we are talking about the boundary hedge, amongst other things, the protection of it, and I would have thought the maintenance of it. But that may be covered by the condition. I think that is probably something which I don't know whether members had a site meeting at any stage, but I think that the fact that the site was largely concealed may well have coloured people's judgments. But of course, we were talking about land use, and in that term, really, the maintenance of the hedge, I think, is probably quite critical. There are other issues which I'd like to raise, in the fact that I don't think you're talking about whether the ecological aspects were properly dealt with. I didn't think that the character of the area was properly dealt with. Looking at officer's report, I couldn't see anywhere where the arguments over the character of the area were considered and balanced, and there was very little said in the committee on the same issue. So I feel that to me, remains outstanding, and particularly that this land use is not something which was there before. There's now a precedent been set. And I think in setting that precedent, it probably, I'm not sure that it was properly considered. The second issue is the green belt issue. That was well rehearsed, and I would simply say that I don't accept that that site would fall into grey belt. If we were looking to release it in a planning context, in a development plan context, which is the context in which I see the grey belt being an issue, I wouldn't have thought it was appropriate in terms of a planning application. But those are personal views, and I will leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, for the benefit of members, Condition 2 deals with hard and soft landscaping. And as part of condition 2, there's a requirement for the existing boundary and planting to be retained. And just to remind members that land use, amenity matters, scale, bulk and massing were actually discussed and dealt with at the previous meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Robin, you've escaped early. Can you go back? Yes, you have to answer questions and right. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Theobald, you made a very interesting point, the character of the area. I don't recall whether we did deliberate that too much in the previous meeting on 11th of June, but I am aware that on the 30th of July, we rejected an application that was also in the countryside on the basis of undermining the character of the area alongside a couple of other criteria that it failed to meet. So I think that's a very interesting point you've made. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not expecting you to answer that or to speak to that.
That is one of the issues we would consider before we made any sort of representations. And as far as I could see, well, it wasn't considered and hasn't been considered. And had it been, I don't know whether the conclusion would have been the same as it was. But anyway, any more questions?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to re-clarify to members, the matters relating to the character of the area were discussed because we discussed the bulk massing of what was being proposed in combination with the bulk massing as well as the pub use, as well as the neighbouring properties. All those issues were discussed and in effect, the proposal that's before you doesn't have a significant impact on the character area due to its scale and the amenity impacts on the neighbours, etc. were all discussed. Therefore, I don't believe it's correct to say these matters have not been discussed. They were actually discussed and they're within the previous report. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Elliott, can you guide by the ecological arguments at present?
I'm just going to respond to that point about, I mean, quite clearly, Sean is not a village of caravans, so the character of the area is very much different. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, members of the committee, anybody else want to make, comment, ask a question, or let Mr. Theobald escape? Thank you. You may escape. Thank you.
Hang on.
Right, that brings us on then to the general discussion, and you have in front of you recommendation with approval with conditions. Any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just listening to what's been said here today. I'm really wondering whether this would have gone through on the 11th if all this information was available to us then. And secondly, Chair, if I can, we still haven't had an answer to the question that both myself and Councillor Elliott asked as to who called this in. For reasons of transparency, I think we should know.
Thank you, Chair. I've dealt with the second point on multiple times now, so I don't feel the need to repeat myself. With regards to the matters before members this evening, the only new matter is ecology. And as the report sets out and as KCC Ecology confirm, there are no matters that members need to take into account which would alter the decision. And the condition that's embedded into the decision of the 11th of June, which, contrary to the speaker from Sean, was actually the same conditions that were published for that particular committee, so they're available as part of that agenda. There is no need to make any further changes. Therefore, I actually don't understand, Councillor, what you're referring to when you say these new matters. There's only one new matter, it's ecology. And what we're advising you is based on the report and the specialist advice we've received. There is no ecological matters that need to be taken into account that should alter your decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't speak. No, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, you cannot speak from the audience. I can't allow that. Apologies. Right, I'm looking around for any other members of the committee who want to comment. Councillor Wardle.
Just a point of clarification, really, I suppose. So we are here tonight just to vote on the ecology issue, not the actual planning act. No. Okay, thank you.
No, it's just the ecology which was provided, the extra information that has been provided as I understand it. We're not reopening the previous decision which was agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So what you're doing is taking into account the ecological information that's before you and determining whether or not that would have changed the decision. And the advice that you've been given is that the original decision still stands, because the ecological advice is that there's no ecological issues on site that need to be factored in to make any changes to your previous decision. So in essence, all we're seeking is a reconfirmation of the 11th of June decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm now going around the members of the committee. Would anybody like now to propose that a question is put? Do I see a seconder? Yes, thank you. So the question is as agreed, which is recommendation approval with conditions. Can I move to a vote on that, please? Those in favour? Those against? You don't want it. Oh, think of it. And 4 against. Right, moving back to the main agenda, if we have in front of us. So, reports for information, as far as I'm aware, there are none. Planning applications determined under delegated powers of director of a copy is in the web library. Any other business which by one measure of special circumstances, I have no reason, there's no reason to exclude anybody. Therefore, I will now close the meeting at, what is it, 7:30. Okay, because it does seem longer. Right, thank you. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you.